I just had a podcast with casting director Rick Pagano, and I wanted to capture this moment so I don't forget it. It was a wonderful, warm, loving conversation that I can't wait to share with you. He talks about his journey as a casting director, casting huge movies in the business, and dealing with directors and dealing with actors, and the humanity that comes with it.
My name is Rick Pagano. I'm a casting director. I've been a teacher, college professor. I've directed plays and written plays I haven't written that other people have written. Now I'm playing music in a rock and roll band
That's
and still
awesome.
writing
Awesome.
and still casting on occasion. We actually have two projects that I'm working on, but I don't cast as much as I used to.
So you really never retire.
I don't know. Retiring is not really. It's you change careers, but I don't think of it as retiring in that way.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Rick, why don't you take us back? I know you've done some really amazing movies on different multiple levels, but why don't you take us back of when you got started, how you got into the business, and then we get into the films you've done, and then we'll dive into the details of some of those films.
I'll try to do this quickly, but I was going to graduate school at Columbia in literature. I was not having a good. I was working on my doctorate. I wasn't having a great time in New York, even though I was born and raised here. I took a year off, went to Paris. Couldn't afford getting into the Sorbonne. You know, you need a student visa in order to stay there for more than 3 months, and so I needed a place to get a student visa. And the student visa I could get, I talked my way into the National Conservatory of Dramatic Art, which is where they train all the actors for the Comédie Française and for movies and TV in Paris. And over the course of the year, I worked as a night clerk in a hotel, and then I would go to class. And eventually, I found myself falling in love more and more with theater and acting and directing. And so when I came back to New York, I changed my doctorate from sort of early English drama and Shakespeare to modern drama. So I did that. I finished the doctoral work, although I never finished writing the dissertation, passed my orals, passed my writtens. But meanwhile I was doing that, I was working in theater. And I did a project called Buried Child by Sam Shepard. I worked as an assistant on that. It won the Pulitzer Prize the day after it closed. And I was sort of running an errand for the producers. I saw someone on the street on Broadway, and he told me about a job at the Pittsburgh Public Theater. They were looking for someone to do three jobs. They wanted someone to be the literary manager, which was something I felt I could possibly do. Literary manager, producer of new plays, and the casting director, all three jobs. So I met a guy named Ben Schachtman, who is still my friend, good friend, close friend, and he hired me, and I became a casting director, producer of new plays, and literary manager, all at once. And the casting director part was the most extroverted part. And I was a sort of natural introvert, and casting just seemed to be something more fun than, hanging around books and literature all the time.
You
And
know,
so that's gravitated into casting. And then I went from the Pittsburgh Public back to New York for a year. Then I got hired to cast for the Mark Taper Forum. So I
wow.
did the casting for the Mark Taper Forum for 2 years. And then I left and started my own company.
And this is what year? What year was this?
That would have been 84, 85 is when I started my own company.
Oh my goodness. So it's interesting, the idea of just quickly to talk about that. They have you being a lit manager and, casting and on. I mean, every job is pretty intense if you want to do it right, no?
Sure. With a literary manager of a theater, I did the program notes. I would do research on each play. On one of the Chekhov plays, I helped with the translation. I sat in on it. I didn't do very much because I didn't speak Russian, but I had some input on it. Literary managers for theaters are not the same as a literary manager for like an agent. It's not a literary agent. It's a guy who basically does a lot of uh, footwork, and I also, I read a lot of plays to
That's
try to
amazing.
find plays for the new
So
play
you
program.
so you build your repertoire. So you started your own business in the 80s,
Hmm.
And you came to Los Angeles or you stayed in New
I
York?
was in Los Angeles for the Mark Taper Forum.
Okay.
Mark Taper Forum's in downtown LA, part of
Okay.
the Music Center. So I cast for the Music Center. I did a little bit of work for the Amundsen too, but mostly it was the Mark Taper Forum. And then I also cast for a lot of Lort theaters. You know, I found a lot of times the theaters like Seattle Rep or the Guthrie or La Jolla. I started actually as a theater casting director, casting for all the Lord theaters.
That's amazing.
And then I gravitated into movies and TV because it was just a better way to make a living, and I needed to make a living. Nobody was paying my bills, so except me. So I had to.
How long were you in the theater casting world?
Well, I was there with Ben Shackman at the Mark Taper at the Pittsburgh Public, and that was for 2 years. And then I did a year here, 3 years, and then I worked for the Taper for 2 years. I was about 10 years. I was doing mostly theater for about 10 years. I did Big River on Broadway that Des McAnuff directed. I did another play that Des directed called The Walk in the Woods on Broadway. And then I did a lot of Lort, or what we call regional theater. In fact, I was jokingly called, forgotten what the TCG West, because Theater Communications Group was the main casting office for East Coast theater casting. And I was basically TCG West for a couple of years.
That's
And then I drifted away from doing theater and found myself mostly focusing on TV and movies.
So TV and movies. Now, in the meantime, you've gotten to know a lot of people in Los Angeles, right? As you were in there. What was the most influential person after your theater endeavors that kind of like nudged you along and what was the dynamics there and when you got into the TV and movies casting, what was the difference of that from a casting director's perspective and also from the actor's perspective?
Um, the person who probably helped me the most with my career was an agent who now is a producer named Paula Wagner. She was an agent at Creative Artists. Somebody I knew introduced me to her, and she helped me get my first 3 or 4 or 5 films while she was an agent. She was Tom Cruise's agent. Eventually, she became his producing partner. Cruise Wagner was a big
Sure.
company, and that was Paula. So she was very influential, and I thank her every day of my life for the work she helped me get. Um, there were other people, there were a lot of other people that were helpful, I think, but I would say mostly it was Paula who helped me get my first start. Um,
You know what's interesting? I have to say, I have this thing on my podcast channel. It's also another podcast, but it's documentary style work. And I did not know you were connected to Paula, but I did something on Paula. It's like a 4 minute documentary piece on Paula Wagner, and you are telling me about Paula Wagner, how she did this and that. So Paula was influential in your business, obviously, and helped open doors. So it was like kind of a mentorship, or was it like a friendship?
well, she would just recommend me for jobs. We didn't, we would bump into each other once in a while. I would come to her office and we would catch up a little bit, but mostly she would call me and she was my agent. She was my agent for about 3, 4 years. Rick
Got it.
Nassidi helped out. A lot of the agents at CAA were really helpful to me actually in those days. So that's how I got a job with Kathryn Bigelow. I cast Point Break and Strange Days with her. I worked on the St. Joan movie, which was a disaster and ended up falling apart. Um, and I ended up getting a lot of movies, I think, off of that. I worked with Jean-Pierre Jeunet on one of the Alien movies. Um,
Rick, you're laying it down thick. I have to ask you some questions about these different projects that you're laying down because it would be a shame for us not to know about it. So, Kathryn Bigelow, which movie was it you said? Was it with
Point,
Keanu?
Point Break with Keanu Reeves and Patrick
Okay.
Swayze and Laurie Petty. Yeah.
So that's a legendary movie. For a few minutes, can you dive into how that was cast and what you had to do and some of the stories in the trenches on that, if you don't mind?
Well, in those days, we had pictures and resumes. In those days, messengers would show up with envelopes, with piles of envelopes. You'd have to take them out of the envelopes and you'd lay them out and you'd separate them by character. And Keanu, well, one of the producers didn't really want Keanu Reeves. He didn't think Keanu was right for the role. And Kathryn wasn't sure she wanted Patrick Swayze at the time. So I had to go, she asked me to go convince the producer that we should use Keanu. And I went in and I talked to him. And then he said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll sign off on Keanu, but you got to convince her to use Patrick Swayze. So then I went out and had to convince Kathryn to use Patrick. In terms of Lori Petty, actually, I had cast Lori in a Stephen King movie for Paramount a few weeks before I started Point Break, and she was actually in a movie that would conflict with the shooting schedule of Point Break. So I took her picture that morning. They, of course, submitted her for the movie. The agency at the time, it was the Gersh agency that was submitting her. And I pulled her picture out and I put it on the side because I knew Kathryn's style. And I had a feeling that she was going to love Lori Petty. So I put it on my desk because there was a table off to the side where Kathryn would walk in every day and look at the women who were going to play the female lead. But for some reason that morning, instead of walking in and looking at the table on the side, she walked right up to my desk. She looked at that picture and she went, that's it. That's who I want. She looked at a picture of Lori Petty and she said, that's who I want. And I mean, it's a lesson for actors because it was a picture of Lori that was sort of from the waist up. It was sort of not your typical, but it was by far not a typical headshot. It was kind of from the hip, from the knees up, actually. And she was kind of tilted like this. She was in ripped jeans and a ripped t-shirt. And she kind of had a screw you look on her face, slightly angry look on her face. And that was exactly the feeling and the type that Kathryn was looking for. And it worked.
So it was purely on a headshot, not even a watch her reel, nothing.
She could just tell from looking at the picture. But she was right also. I mean, Kathryn had a good sense. That was Lori. I knew Lori. She was great. But she had a kind of, tough, sexy, slightly masculine, but still very sweet. I mean, Lori's a great person. And
okay. So she knew who the actress was. She knew her work.
Oh, she didn't know her work at all. She had
wow.
She had no idea who she was. No, Lori at the time. Yeah. At the time, Lori was an unknown actress. So
okay. So just for actors that are watching, because this is very interesting, and in that specific situation. The director just looked at the headshot and based on that one frame said, I want her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that normal?
There are people who do that. European directors have a tendency to cast on the basis of a look. I've worked with some European directors and they wanted just someone with a particular look and the acting part was not as important to them. I mean, it turns out Lori was also a really terrific actress and still is.
Right.
I think when I worked with Jean-Pierre Jeunet, we had a real challenge because, well, besides there was a language issue, although I spoke French, but there was a language issue with the actors. But he also felt that there was a lack of interesting faces in Los Angeles.
Wow.
He felt that everybody was pretty and really good looking and that the really interesting faces were hard to find. And so for us, the challenge was finding faces that were interesting to him, a little craggy, a little different, something not quite typically perfect.
This is this is such insight, Rick. This is such insight.
I hope it's helpful.
Well, I mean, you're talking about directors' personalities making decisions based on what they like. And really what most people like, you see a lot of different commercials of these casting people out there. Oh, I can show you how to do this. I can teach you how to do that, which we can get into. Yeah. But it seems like it's literally your pure instincts as a casting person, knowing what the director is looking for and really like maneuvering towards some actors that you think they like.
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with a look, and sometimes has to do with an acting style. There are, I worked with some producers and directors who want no acting at all.
Mm,
They want just flat, everything to be flattened out. And those sometimes it's really important to find the actors who can do that, who are
got it.
very, very, very low key. And then there
Got
are
it.
people who want something that's a little bit more um, extravagant, let's say.
Got it. So when you cast the film and you're done with the first round of casting, and you do you cast all the roles or just the top headliners?
It depends on the movie. We cast, I did Drugstore Cowboy with Gus Van Sant. We cast all the roles.
Okay.
And we did, and Point Break, I did all the roles. I mean, most of the movies in those days, I did all the roles and we traveled. And I think what happened was that by, the 90s, by the mid 90s, we started using local casting directors.
Hmm.
And that happened a little bit more. I guess it was a way to save money for the studios.
Hmm. Now, what I've noticed about agencies, right? Like, and this is also something that's out there that people say, all the top roles are not even being advertised. It goes straight to, like, the agencies basically have a monopoly on the top roles and whatnot. Do you find that to be true?
I think it depends on the director and the project. I think that there are a lot of independent movies that require a well-known name to play the lead role. But there are also opportunities for unknown actors, especially
Hmm.
in Netflix and streaming. There are a lot of roles that are being cast by actors that are working actors, good actors, actors we
Hmm.
all know that the casting directors and the casting community is really aware of, but
Hmm.
that haven't necessarily gotten their shot big time with a big movie.
Hmm. And once
It's
the film is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I mean, well, you look at the cast of Severance. They're all just good working actors who've
Mm.
been given breaks. People who have come in for years and auditioned and auditioned and auditioned. Now they're well-known name actors.
So the Academy, I think, recently decided to give awards for casting, as I recall. Am I correct on this?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, do you think they're a little late?
yeah. I think they're a little late.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like you have so much to do with making the movie.
Well, it depends on your point of view. First of all, a good director, if there's a good director around, but I think there's a director. I think it was Alan Pakula who said that directing is correcting the mistakes you made in casting. And another director said that casting is 90% of the
Yeah,
movie. But directors won't admit that. And they don't even want to call us casting directors, where they want to call us casting agents instead of casting directors. But agents, one of the things I'd like to clear up for anyone who's not clear about it, who's maybe watching this, is an agent is someone who gets a commission from an actor. That's what an agent is. A real estate agent gets a commission. Agents get commissions. Casting directors are on the production staff. We get a salary like an editor. We edit actors the way that editors edit film.
yeah,
That's and our
that's amazing.
job is to we work for the producers and the director. We don't work for the actors.
All right.
The agents work for the actors. The agents represent the actors. Our job is to find the best actor for the role. So we get paid by the production company, the studio,
To do
whatever.
that. So
It's a
when
big difference.
there's a big difference. You're right. There's a big
We're not
difference.
agents. We're definitely
No,
not agents.
you're definitely casting directors.
That's our job.
Yeah, that's what you do creatively. You're helping make a movie. I've noticed there's a lot of that when a movie comes out, everybody wants to take everybody's credit. It's crazy. But um, does an actor that, let's just say somebody's in the theater somewhere, I mean, at least in the time that you were actively casting, for one of these movies that you've mentioned, how did you come to a conclusion of the five, six names that you're gonna look into? Is it, yeah, how would you do that?
How do you do that? Well, it takes I found that it took a long time for me to be able to see the difference between a good actor and an actor that's not so good. Um, there are just too many elements. It's really hard to kind of know. It has to do with an actor walking in the door. There's a simplicity to the work, but it also is interesting and it's carved and smart and it builds. It's not flat, the plains of Kansas. But I mean, there are too many things. It's really something instinctual that begins to that you feel after years of doing it. It's funny because Gene Smart's going to get some kind of an Emmy, but I cast Gene back in 1980 in Macbeth. She played Lady Macbeth, and I was telling someone just the other day about this, that to this day, there's the only time I remember actually being so terrified that the hairs on my arms stood up in a live theater performance was watching Jean Smart play Lady Macbeth, the mad scene in Lady Macbeth. Every night, I would actually go to the show every night to watch her do that scene because her work was so brilliant. And this was,
I love her.
This was 45 years ago.
I love her. She's isn't she on that Hulu show now?
You're on Hacks.
Yes, Hacks. I love that show. I love her. I can't stop taking my eyes off of her. What an actress. Just
But there are a lot of wonderful actors. There are wonderful actors who also don't necessarily get recognized. Most of them do. Most of them get a shot sooner or later. But then there are a lot of actors who don't necessarily.
So you said that the 5, 6 names that you would come to depends on the director. And would the agents have influence on you? Hey, look at my guy. Look at my girl.
If someone tells you to go to this Chinese restaurant is really great, and you go and it's really good, the next time that person recommends a restaurant, you're going to tend to trust them. If you have someone who raves about a restaurant and it's terrible, you're going to tend not to trust them. So, frankly, there are agents in town who tell us how wonderful their actors are, and they turn out not to be so wonderful. And then there are agencies, and not only the top agencies, there are wonderful, wonderful agencies that have great taste in actors, and they represent actors who tend to work but aren't necessarily stars. So,
Yeah.
and frankly, there are also agents. Some of the actors at the top agencies aren't the greatest actors either. They look great, but the agencies know. CAA knows which actors can quote sell. They've got the right look, or they've got a right feel, or something. There's something about them that makes them want to represent them, and so they end up at CAA or WME or UTA.
Got it.
Usually there's some talent behind it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, listen, man. What I'm gathering out of this is a perspective from a casting director who's pretty seasoned in the world of that. And what you're telling me is no difference than somebody who does any other profession and they just get good at what they do based on all the elements that come at them on a daily basis. It has really, you can't, and I'm looking at this from an actor's perspective, okay? Someone who, like to say, wants to be in movies and wants to do, television, and they come in and they're in their head, and this is something I wanted to ask you, because the way you're speaking is so matter of fact. It is very logical. You come from a very secure place when you're talking about your experiences. Yet when the actor walks into the room, it's the most insecure place they can walk into.
That's right.
What have you seen? Yeah, what have you seen?
Well, Ben Shackman, the first guy who hired me, after the first casting project I had were 2 plays. One play had 30 characters in it. One play had 17 characters, and I had to cast both in 3 weeks by myself with no assistant, and I had never cast before. So needless to say, I was panicked the day of the first day of auditions. This is the very first day I ever did an actual casting session. And I was hadn't gotten much sleep because I had spent the whole night trying to organize everything, make sure everything was perfect. And I said, "What do I do now? What do I do now?" And Ben said something very smart. He said, "You go outside, you shake hands with the actor, you ask him if he needs anything, and you smile." And I took that as a really important piece of advice. And I've always sort of suggest when I've had a lot of associates and assistants, and I've always told them the same thing. You got to go make the actor feel at home. If you can make the actor feel at home, he's going to do a better job. If he can do a better job, we all get to go home sooner. So the key
Wow.
is to make an actor feel at home. It's not just me trying to be a good guy, although I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I don't think it is. I think it's about good business because if, as I say, if the actor feels at home, he's going to do better work. And if he does better work, we cast the role sooner and we can all go home.
Yeah, that is so easy. What would you say to an actor? And by the way, I mean my background, acting, writing, making independent films, and also a couple of medium-sized studio stuff. Uh, what would you say to an actor? Because there's this moment, there's what you're looking for as a casting agent, and then there is being
Casting director.
no, that's
Casting
incorrect.
director.
So please tell me.
Casting director. You said casting agent.
Oh my goodness. Okay, there's something, I'm going to keep all this, by the way. There's something that you're looking for as a casting director in the film. Yet the actor comes in petrified in their head, and they have to learn how to calm their nerves, focus on what's in front of them, come up with creative choices, be in the moment, and connect. What happens when that does not happen? How do you adjust that?
Depends. If the actor looks like he knows what he's doing and he's pretty good, you can give him an adjustment and have him try it again. But a lot of times people, here's what I think happens. People, most actors spend their time reading the scenes over and over again with someone else. They use up all the instincts outside the room. Then they come in and their head turns on and they're going, "Oh, I'm in the middle of an audition." And I think the opposite process is the way to go, which is when you're outside, you should do the work that a good teacher of English literature, which is what I used to do. I used to teach English at college. And what you need to do is look at a scene. Why did the writer write the scene? Why did the writer write it? Why did the writer write those particular lines? Why did the writer use the instead of a? Because sometimes it makes a difference. Why did the writer saying, what's the intention of the writer? And if you can figure out what the intention of the writer is when you're outside the room, when you're in the waiting room, or when you're at home getting ready to audition, then you walk in and then let your instincts go. So sometimes I think it's a good idea not to rehearse a scene at all, or certainly not to over rehearse a scene, because when you over rehearse a scene, you can do what's called you get into rehearsal. We used to use that phrase. When you rehearse someone too much, they're now in the middle of the process trying to figure out, you know, in theater, you have this rehearsal process and you get into it. And then in the middle of it, you're kind of terrible. The actors are terrible because they're still they're waiting around in the muck of 1,000 different choices that they've made. And usually somewhere around opening night, they come out of it and they solidify and things get better. But you don't want to go in for an audition when you're in the middle of that muck.
Ah,
So you either have to, that's why, for example, when you do readings of plays or screenplays, you either don't rehearse at all, let them come in fresh and just do the reading based on their instincts, their first impression of how they would do the role. Or you really give it a rehearsal process. But this in between stuff where you read through it 3 or 4 times and then you do the reading, not a good idea. In
that
my
is that is impeccable advice. And my last question regarding that, and I want to move on to your other achievements and accomplishments. Um, from a psychological perspective, people talk about actors, and you're the perfect casting director to ask that question to. Uh, they say, "Oh, if you're an actor, something went wrong in your life as a child. Either your mom left you, you have abandonment issues." Your dad is this, there's this outsider, and it's true. I mean, I can definitely speak as an immigrant and trying to fit in into every school I went to. there's a thing that happens of belonging, right? And then you walk into a casting director's office, and I'm sure there's millions of actors who are not where they want to be in that sense. And there's those issues that may be in place, yet you are talking very matter-of-factly about a business structure and how things go, and it makes sense what you're talking about. How do you deal with this psychological, unfortunate mess that an actor may have? And do you think they should do therapy before they get into acting?
I I think there's apples and oranges. I think it's I think everybody's got issues. Everybody could use a little therapy or more than a little therapy. I've certainly had more than a little therapy myself. It's good. All the best people do it. Um, I think that if you're a writer, you've got issues. Whoever you are, you've got issues. I read books by well-known writers who have issues. So I think it's just you're dealing with human beings. So really the question is more about how you take what's inside you and how you express it and how it matches up with the material that you're given. Because the material that you're given may not be something that serves, if you're doing an episode of The Pit, the show about an emergency room, and you're playing a doctor and you're talking about a lot of terminology that's medical terminology, it's not really time for you to use your psychological issues or any kind of childhood trauma, because you're a doctor and you'd be doing the same thing that a doctor who might do it. If a doctor had trauma as a child, is he supposed to express that trauma while he's in the middle of saving someone's life in an ER, in an emergency room? No. You do the job. That's what you do.
Russell Crowe calls some of the moments that he comes up with in his acting golden nuggets. And I think what you just pointed out by my interpretation of listening to you is use your own golden nuggets.
But
There are,
some of those golden nuggets may be unconscious.
yeah.
There's a moment in Kramer versus Kramer when Dustin Hoffman, I don't know if he did this on purpose or what, but his wife has left him, and he's talking to his boss, and there's a photograph on the side he's sitting on a chair in his boss's office, and there's a photograph of his boss's family right there. And he picks it up and he starts just rubbing it gently. And it's so moving because it's about, he's caressing the idea of the notion of family while he's talking to his boss. Beautiful. I don't know if it was unconscious or not. Who knows? But it's a great moment.
Well, I got a Dustin Hoffman story. I had a film called The Storyteller. It was based on my life, and we got Dustin Hoffman and Sam Worthington, and Madeline Stowe interested in the project, and so I talked to Dustin Hoffman like for 3 hours on cell phone and Zoom, and he is a very interesting, he has his own perspective, obviously, on everything that he does, but he went into some of the racism that he felt as a child in Santa Monica. I thought he was from New York. He's from Santa Monica.
Hmm.
And how they were asking him, where are you from? Because they wanted to call him out that he's a Jew versus he's an American. And he was talking about that with me, saying, something would churn in my stomach and say, no, I'm an American. I'm an American. And there you go to the example you just talked about, Kramer versus Kramer. And the question that I had asked you previously to that, it all connects because he used whatever he had. That's what makes actors unique. Am I right?
I couldn't agree more. Sure. You got to use it. But you don't necessarily have to it may ultimately not come out consciously.
Hmm. Interesting. Have you ever worked with Dustin Hoffman?
No, I haven't.
Not him.
No.
Okay, so what was the what was the best experience that you finished casting a film or you were in the process and you took a step back and you said, "Wow, this is really what what I wanted to do in my life." Was there a moment like that?
Sure.
Would you
but
like
it
to
wasn't.
express
But it
that?
wasn't casting. It wasn't. I wasn't casting at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was about 1 in the morning, and I was at the Elephant Lillian Theater in Hollywood, and a play that I was directing. They were hammering, and they were putting up the set and pizza. We had some pizza on the floor, and cokes and a couple beers, and suddenly the lighting designer said, "Okay, here comes the first light cue," and he gave me my first light cue for my play, and I thought that's what I want to do. I want to direct. I want to direct plays. So if, but it's too hard now. So I don't. It's too expensive. It's too complicated. It's too difficult to do. But you know, that was the moment I went, I love this. This is and it was 1 in the morning. It wasn't I wasn't, there was no audience there. It's just this moment of perfection. It's the first light cue when you're doing a piece of theater and your lights come up, it brings the whole thing alive in a really interesting way.
That is a wonderful moment that you just shared.
Pizza on the
And
floor.
that
Pizza
was your
box,
drive, huh?
pizza boxes on the floor.
That
The
doesn't
pizza,
matter, man. That's
yeah,
irrelevant. That's those are moments that people that inspire a whole lifetime.
yeah.
I mean, wow. Okay, so it wasn't in casting, it was you were directing a play,
Mhm.
and when the lights came on, which is
First light cue.
probably if you looked at it in a practical matter, none of it makes sense, but in an emotional matter, you put all the dots together.
But let me add that I think that for people, for most human beings, if you're open to it, those moments change. What it is that lights up your candle, let's say, what it is that fires you up may change over time. So for me, when I was 24, 25, going to Paris lit my fire, my internal fire. When I was 50, directing a play, seeing that first light cue come up was something for me that was a big, that lit my fire. Now playing music is sort of when I sit down at the piano and I start playing with the guys I play with, that particular thing is what, lights my fire. Plus being with my son, being with my wife does too.
I remember when we were working together briefly on a project that we didn't get greenlit. Uh, you were talking about retiring back then, which was about 10, 15 years ago or something like that. When did you retire?
I haven't retired technically. I mean, as I said, we have an offer out. We have an offer out right now. We have a pay or play offer out to an actor right now.
Okay, so you didn't retire. I remember you were saying, "Oh, I got retired." See, this is wonderful. Now, any of the movies that you cast, Rick, I just want to be very upfront with you, man. You have such amazing stories. I know you have a newsletter that you send out in
I have a Substack post.
Substack post. So, what was the motivation behind starting a Substack post? And you're telling stories on that post.
Yeah, I tell stories about casting. I tell stories about my life, but a lot of stuff about the business and casting. Yeah, a lot of the essays are about what it was like and what it's like now, how things have changed since I began and now. So
What was the film? Did any of your movies, I know you talk about Emmys, did the film that you cast start racking up awards by any chance?
Hotel Rwanda was nominated for best film, I think. Drugstore Cowboy won a lot of I think it was, I don't know if it won Spirit Awards or not. I'm trying to remember. It was given some nominations.
Did anybody go on stage and says, I want to thank Rick Pagano for casting this?
Sure. Randy Newman. Love Randy Newman's music. But Randall Miller directed Bottle Shock, which is a movie that's really fun. You should see it if you have a chance. Randy thanked me when he got up at Sundance because it premiered at Sundance, and when he got up to talk, he thanked me for casting it. He does actually every time he's premiered a movie. He thanks me.
It's amazing. You named one individual, and how many movies have you actually casted in your career time?
80 or 90? I don't know.
80 or 90. So 80 or 90 movies, and you worked with some big directors.
Mhm.
Did any time in your career path, and I again, there's so much, 80 movies could be 80 different sessions of this, but was there any time in your career where you thought an actor was right for it and the director just didn't get it?
Sure, of course. A lot.
How,
Happens a lot.
how did you go about that, generally speaking?
Well, you put in your best shot, and then, you know, I was casting Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and Glenn Close came in and was brilliant. She knew everything. She knew the entire play, and the director didn't want her because I guess he didn't think she looked right for the role. He ended up using Kirstie Alley, who was not nearly as good, but looked more right for the role to him. But she wasn't anywhere as good as Glenn would have been. Um, and I tried to cast Channing Tatum in a movie called Havoc in the lead role, and nobody believed me. And he ended up getting a role in a tiny role. He ended up playing a small role in the background in it. I convinced him to at least use him in that. And then, of course, he went on to do bigger things. And I actually recommended him for a movie that helped him get his start. And then when I did Bottle Shock, Randy fought me a little bit on using Chris Pine, but I basically just said, just shut up and cast him. Because I got along with Randy well enough to do that. But you can't do that with most people. You can't force people. It's the director in a movie. It's the director who says this is who I want, and the producers are going to say who they want. And
Are you still in touch with the directors and the actors and the people that you work with now that you're in New York and doing something a little different?
not too much, not unless I feel like it. Some of them I don't. Some of them in the TV world, I would say most of the people I work with in TV, other than my partner, Debbie Manwiller, most of the people I work with in TV are not people I'd want to have dinner with. So
But you did have some connections with some people that you enjoyed working with, obviously, and that's
I,
why.
I enjoyed working with David Kelly. We won a lot of Emmys. The show won a ton of Emmys. I was nominated for Picket Fences. Debbie won for Chicago Hope, and then she won again. I was nominated again for 24 one year, and then another year she was nominated and she won for 24. So she's got two Emmys. I've been nominated three or four times and never won, but that's okay. No big deal. I would say that the only piece of advice I would give to anyone is that if people in show business who hesitate to have a family should not hesitate to have a family. That the greatest thing I've done is to have my wife and child. Having a son as late as I did. Um, you know, Maybe I regret not having children sooner, but I don't ultimately because I have this family and this son, this life. But I think it's possible to have both. It's possible to have kids. And I'm trying to remember the actress from Everybody Loves Raymond. I think is it Patricia Richardson who she was about to get out of the business altogether. She had kids, she had a family. She didn't care. She went in for an audition that she didn't even really want to go in on. She had heard of
Yeah.
this, guy named anyway. She got the role, but she didn't even care enough to go in to care. And I think that if you have a life outside of acting, if you have a life in which acting is not the most important part of your life, it gives you a context and it places acting and it gives it a kind of priority that doesn't become overblown or you become desperate that you have to get this role or else you'll die. I think if you have a rich life, a rich personal life, a rich family life, you bring more to the table when you walk into an audition.
Wow. Those words are savvy and smart and deeply rooted. And I think those are really words to think about. You're right. That's a big issue. It does, I think a lot of people, I think there's a sense of belonging that happens in the film industry and the television industry, and you belong and you become part of it. And I think COVID interrupted that very severely. Do you think that's correct?
Sure. It's also made it harder because now we do self-tapes, and so casting's not as one of the other reasons I don't cast very much right now is that it's not as much fun. The last movie I cast was all self-tapes. And a couple of years ago, it was in the middle of COVID. And it's just it's just not as much fun. The fun part was seeing people that you'd known for years and asking about their family. I actually just wrote a Substack post about this, about personal contact, and that the agents would call you and managers would call you, and they might be people you'd never, if you saw them on the street, you might not recognize the agents and managers, but you talked on the phone all the time. And now, more and more, there's just not as much connection, personal connection. The actors don't come in for auditions as often. The casting directors and the agents and managers don't talk as much on the phone as they used to. And that's a shame. That's something I think we've lost.
That is amazing. Is there any time, this is one of the, if the role was written for a white guy and the black guy walked in, what would the opportunities? Nothing. Huh?
I think that it doesn't matter. It mostly doesn't matter. And there are roles where we've gone back and forth between whether it should be a man or a woman.
The
We've
race
had,
doesn't matter to you, basically.
and I'm not even sure gender matters. In a lot of cases, we've done movies that have started with a man playing the role. And I was working on a soccer movie last year where we went back and forth between using a man as the coach and a woman as the coach, the lead role. And we actually made offers to both. We made offers to to a couple of men and then offers to a couple of women.
So, okay, so you have to rewrite this or make it look like,
A
I
big
guess the
deal. It's not a
script
big
is this.
rewrite. In a lot of cases, it's not a big rewrite. So you can go to, you can, whether they're black or Latino or whatever, doesn't matter. In the case of the soccer movie, having a Latino coach would help because there are a lot of Latino kids who love soccer. And I also think that there were some sponsors and financiers who, being Latino, felt that it would be really good if the coach were
Yeah,
Latino.
yeah. No, totally. But so the idea of actors thinking, well, they want this guy. He's, I don't know. He's a white guy. He's a black guy. He's a Hispanic guy. They're not gonna cast me. That's horse shit.
I think that there's enough emphasis on diversity still in the business, even enough people really trying to create diverse casts. I actually think this is going to sound controversial, but I actually think it's if you're a white male who's in his 50s or 60s right now, an actor, character actor who's in his, and you're actually going to have a much harder time because those kinds of roles, they can go either, unless you're playing, the father of someone who's a particular race. Um, in a lot of cases, let's say there's a judge or a doctor. I think that the studios and the casting director, the casting community is going to say, well, let's go with an African American for that role. Let's go with an Asian American or Latino American for that role. So I think that it's actually gone a little bit in the other direction myself.
This is the first time I've heard this phrase a lot where casting agents say,
Directors, yeah. Casting directors,
casting
yeah.
directors, sorry, apologies. I will keep this in there. I apologize. I'm going to correct it. It's casting directors say, "Oh, we want you to succeed. We're rooting for you." It just has not sunk in, at least with me. You're rooting my ass. Bullshit. You got your ideas. You know who the fuck you want to cast. Whatever. I'll do the audition is the mentality sometimes. That's the way it is. But the way you just described it, obviously in a much longer version than what I just said, it's not the case. What I just said is not true.
Hmm.
It's actually the opposite of that, which is what you just explained in detail about how this is all, we are one in one world, one creativity. Is that right?
I'm not sure what you mean, but I think I think that there's just a lot more diversity in casting actors now. It may be that there's not a lot of diversity among directors or among writers. I don't know. I'm not really a part of that. But there seems to be, when I look at shows, there certainly is a lot of diversity in the shows that I'm watching on television. I don't really cast television anymore, so I can't. I'm not someone who's an authority on recent television casting. But what I watch when I watch a show, I notice that there's quite a lot of diversity.
So you still got the fire in you. You still love what you do.
When it comes to casting,
Yeah.
I enjoy what I do. Let's say I don't think love is the issue.
Is
The
music
money
now?
anymore, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it when I'm working with someone that I enjoy working with. There are a couple of directors and producers that I enjoy working with, and when I'm working with them, I enjoy it. I wouldn't say love would be a word I would use.
Love.
By the way, I don't know that I've ever quote loved casting. I've always enjoyed it. It was never really something that I aspired to be.
Then that moment with the pizzas and the light, what love was that?
I was directing. I was directing something. I wasn't casting it. That was me directing my own play, one of my own plays.
Got it. But yet you found a way to make a pretty good living in the business and
I made a
making
good living. I needed to make a living, and that's how I made a living. And I enjoyed it. I think I enjoy it less now because I think the process, as I said, the process has changed. It's more difficult to make personal connections, and part of the fun, what was fun about casting, isn't really as much fun anymore because mostly you're looking at self-tapes. Oh, that's my son, a t-shirt my son made. It's a guitar. It's a rock and roll guitar.
What's the name of your son?
Theo.
Theo.
Got it.
The one thing I regret meeting you a long time ago is that we didn't get any closer because you have a lot of great things, stories, and I
Thank
think
you.
you and I could have been friends. It reminds me of the midnight run when they're at the end of the rope and they say, maybe in another lifetime we could have been friends, and that's kind of how I feel about you. I think there is this
Good.
connection there, and but the business got in the way of it, and that's just the way it is. But hopefully now we can, support each other down the line and keep going and
Good.
stay in touch. Mr. Rick
Sounds
Pagano,
good.
casting director, legendary storyteller. I want to really thank you very much for being on this podcast. You've been amazing.
Thank you, sir. Take care, Stephen. Take care.